Welcome to Week 2, the second and final video from Orchard Church's Missional Community Teaching Series on a Rule of Life. Last week, in Week 1, we developed a frame and a personal mission statement that we're going to use to craft our personal rule of life. And if you watched that Week 1 video, you knew that those questions that you answered and considered for this week are very important. So, if you have not yet watched that Week 1 video, I would strongly encourage you to pause this video now, go back and watch the Week 1 video, and answer the questions that accompany that content. Today, we are going to work on drafting a personal rule of life, a cadence and rhythm in 5 key areas of your life that will help you to live out a life of intentionality, leading you to become the person that God has uniquely created you to be. And today we are going to cover quite a bit of ground. So without further ado, let's jump right into the content. In his letter to the early Roman church, the Apostle Paul encouraged the believers in Rome not to conform to the patterns of the world, but instead to be transformed by the renewing of their minds. You see, though it was 2,000 years ago, the world that the early believers lived in was actually not too dissimilar from the world we live in today. The biggest difference for the early church was that pagan statues would have met them everywhere that they went. When they went into public places, crossed a bridge, entered someone else's home, or just engaged in their everyday life, they would have been asked to worship idols and gods in the physical form. In our modern age, we don't have statues or idols like that, but we do have modern idols and gods. These are things like idolizing and worshiping the ideal of wealth, or status, or accomplishment, a perfect family, and even Taylor Swift said that karma is a god. And so, to live intentionally is not to be conformed to the pattern of the world in which you seek a life where you worship or idolize these things, but instead focus on a life living in concert with God and the people that you love and care about the most, living a life of intentionality. Not to be conformed to the world, but to be transformed into the person that God made you to be by the renewing of your schedule. And so this is what a rule of life is. It's 5 key areas that we're going to explore each of today, and setting a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual cadence for your life in each of those 5 areas. The 5 areas of a rule of life all start with the letter T. They are time, trust, temple, treasure, and talent. And we are going to consider each one of those 5 today before setting out on crafting your personal rule of life. And then we're going to offer you a matrix to prayerfully consider and write down something you're going to do on a regular basis in each of those 5 areas in partnership with God, your closest relationships, and with the prayer and accountability of your missional community. So let's jump in to the first T, and that is the rule of time. Since the beginning of the early church, Christians throughout history have utilized time and space as a way of developing their relationship with Jesus. The church calendar as a whole starts with Advent and Christmas each year, ends at All Saints' Day, and then starts all over again. The week in which we live is an ancient 6 days of work and a day of Sabbath and rest. The church mothers and the church fathers in the early church developed what are known as the office and the hours. Those are liturgies ways to engage with your Bible and prayer on a daily basis to further develop your spiritual formation. You see, we can use our time to grow spiritually or not to grow spiritually. According to author Stephen Macchia, our time is the most basic and often most precious currency that we have. And this is unique to the other 4 T's that we're going to explore today. But time, once it's spent, is gone forever. You see, to create time and space for God is the core foundation from which the other 4 T's will flow. So I wonder today, how do you schedule your day, week, month, season, quarter, or year to intentionally make time for God? How and when do you pray? What does your Sabbath look like? When do you read your Bible? When is your quiet time? Do you take an intentional retreat or time away each year to be with God and just listen to Him? Now, there isn't one right way to live out a rule of time, but it is a discipline that must be developed if you want to grow spiritually. If you don't already have a rhythm, it can be hard to start one, but it's important that you start where you are and intentionally give God your time and allow Him to shape and transform you spiritually. The biggest difference between time and the other 4 areas is that time is developed not by doing, but by being. Author Evelyn Underhill wrote, "We mostly spend our lives conjuring 3 verbs: to want, to have, and to do. Craving, clutching, and fussing on the material, political, social, emotional, intellectual, even the religious plane. We are kept in perpetual unrest, forgetting that none of these verbs have any ultimate significance, except so far as they are transcended by and included in the fundamental verb, to be. And that by being, not wanting, not having, and not doing, is the essence of a spiritual life. So to set your time rule of life is to start where you are, aim first to be with God, to give Him time just to be with Him, and to set a rhythm of prayer, Bible, Sabbath, rest, listening, and retreat. So start where you are, aim to be, and set out by developing your rule of time. Next is the rule of trust. These are the relational rhythms in your life, the ways that you spend time with your family, with your friends, and developing the most important personal relationships that you have in your life. So last week, you answered some questions about the relationships and the roles that you play in your life. So as you consider that list that you made last week, who are the most important people in your life? What are some relationships that you know that you need to spend more time intentionally investing in? Who is on your list? As you look at that list today, consider, are there any relationships that you have that are very important to you that have some conflict or trauma in them? It's important that we just don't set out to spend more time with people or develop relationships that are unhealthy. So something we would encourage you to do is to address the conflict and any unhealth in the relationships that you have. This is going to be fundamental in making sure these relationships are actually life-giving to you, informative in your rule of time. And also, consider whether or not you need to spend some time investing in the relationship with yourself, in your own mental and emotional health. You see, right now in my life, like you are, I am very busy. In the midst of church planting, I'm also wanting to invest intentional time developing my marriage with Leah, the relationships that I have with our daughters, as well as spending time really seeking after creating a sense of rootedness in male friendships. And the danger in all of that is all of those things are good, but I know that I have some unaddressed trauma and conflict in my life. and that to avoid investing in that and treating it now means that it can really become an emergency later on. So consider, as you look at the list of your most important relationships, where are you discerning that you need to spend more time? What relationships are going to give you life rather than suck life away from you? Who are the people in which you need to create boundaries around? And where would you most like to spend your time? All of that through the lens of your own emotional and mental health. Setting a rhythm in this area, your relational priorities, is the rule of trust. On to the third, and that is the rule of your temple. Here, temple is the regular rhythm that you give to caring for your body, your mind, and your heart. This is anywhere from your physical fitness to your education and professional development to the preventative care of your body to ensure that you live a long and healthy life. To frame the rule of temple, consider looking in the mirror and listing the descriptive words about you and your physical state that come to your mind. When you think about the person that you are today against the person that you desire to be in your ideal future, what are the things that you are going to do to get from here to there? What words would you like to replace in descriptions about your body, your mind, and your heart? How can you make this a reality? Is there something in your life that you'd like to learn more about? Is there a degree or a program that will help you advance in your career or start a new one? Consider your physical health. When is the last time you went to your annual checkup? Considering your age and your family history, are there any preventative measures that you need to take now or in the next year to ensure that you remain healthy? As you think and set about your rule of temple, consider these 4 R's of your body and your mind. The first R is that of rest. It's important that you live a life from rest and not rest from your life. Consider, are you sleeping enough? How are you caring for yourself? When do you get time away and invest in your own self-care? The next R is replenish. How is your diet and your exercise? Are there any foods that you need to cut back on or cut out entirely? When are you spending time to get your body moving in exercise, whether that be getting out for a walk, a run, or other ways that you can invest in renewing and replenishing your body? The third R is that of renew. This is the preventative care area. It's going to see a doctor and addressing your physical body. But it's also spending time renewing yourself through a vacation, a regular rhythm of getting away, and spending time doing the things that give you life. It's also creating space in your rhythm and cadence to be creative. Consider the areas that when you have time that you just love to invest in. It's important that your rule of life allows you to do those things to renew your body and mind. And finally, release. You see, it's all important to invest in our body and our mind. But it's also important to consider that we must place our relationship with God and with others above our own self-image. And so if there's anything that is out of alignment in this area, I would encourage you to bring them to God through your rule of time and allow God to speak into you who He has created you to be and how He would have you invest in your body and your mind. Not to make an idol over your self-image, but instead to live into your identity in Jesus. Temple is all about a rhythm, to care for our body, our heart, and our mind. So as you consider your rule of temple, what are you doing to steward your best physical life? Next is the rule of treasure. In Matthew 6, Jesus says that wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's no surprise that the health of our financial and material stewardship matters a great deal in this life, and it actually matters a great deal to God. You might be surprised to know that I am a byproduct of the 1990s hip-hop culture. Back in the 90s, there was a very popular group called the Wu-Tang Clan, and they had a famous song that was an acronym that stands for Cash Rules Everything Around Me. At the risk of traversing a bridge that's way too far, I think the Wu-Tang Clan had something figured out that Jesus would go on to preach later in Matthew 6. Jesus said, "No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life." And he goes on, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all those things will be given to you as well." There are hundreds of other verses in the Bible about stewardship, generosity, money, our possessions, and the effect those things have on our hearts and our lives. But Jesus captures it best in the verse that we just read. The world that we live in is ruled by money. It's ruled by seeking after wealth. And we, as followers of Jesus, live in that world. You see, money is not bad in and of itself, but it cannot be worshipped. Stewardship and how money affects us is key in developing a rule of treasure. So I wonder, how does money make you feel? Is it gross to even talk about it? Do you know that it's something that is a necessity in life, but you need to be more intentional about setting a budget or financial priorities that you are going to partner with your family or your spouse about? Do you want to be more generous with the church or other charitable organizations? Do you need to be more intentional about planning for your retirement and the legacy that you like to live for your family? You see, the rule of treasure is all about creating the regular rhythms of financial stewardship that allow you to honor both God with your finances, but also live a life of financial freedom that makes living into the other 4 T's possible. Everything in life takes resources. So how are you best stewarding yours to live an intentional life? Is this a matter of setting a budget and reviewing it on a regular basis? Setting other financial priorities? Starting to or increasing your gift to the church? Or just getting a better handle on your personal finances? This is the rule of treasure, and God is inviting you to lean in. Just as Jesus preached in Matthew 6, God will give you an abundant life if you seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. This is the rule of treasure. And finally, the 5th and final T, the rule of talent. Considering the work you did last week around your gifts, vision, and mission, the rule of talent is all about fulfilling the unique mission of your life. In what ways do you sense an invitation to do something more with your life, as to change the world around you and leave a lasting legacy in your community and with your family? How are you wired? Where do you want to learn, grow, or get better? When do you think is the unique vocation of your life? And how will you spend every day, week, month, season, and year to get there? For example, if you are called to be a teacher, where are you teaching? Or how will you become a teacher? If you have a burden, for example, to serve the houseless population, when and where are you actually doing that? If you have a deep desire to become a world-class skier, then when will you get out on the mountain? You see, the rule of talent is an exercise of our current and future reality. How will you get from here to there to see your personal mission fulfilled? This is the rule of talent. It's a cadence and rhythm to invest in yourself, utilizing your gifting and your personal mission to become the absolute best you that God has created you to be. Now that we've considered the 5 T's, we can set out on the important work of crafting our personal rule of life. On the screen, in just a moment, you are going to see a matrix appear. We'll also include this in the notes to the video. You're going to see the cadence of day, week, month, season or quarter, and year, crossed with the 5 T's that we consider of time, trust, temple, treasure, and talent. As you've listened to this video and considered the frames in the work that you did last week, pause to pray and ask God to lead your steps as you start to sketch out your own personal rule of life. Now, it's important to note that you should not feel obligated to fill out every single box on that matrix. Again, like we shared last week, this should not be a burden. Another thing that you feel like you have to do that doesn't give you life. If you want to fill out something in every single area, that's wonderful. But it's important to focus on the cadence and rhythm in each area that is going to help you to be and become the person that God has made you to be. One last thought before we move on. It's important here to consider the why over the what. They say that New Year's resolutions often fail because people focus on what they are trying to do rather than why they are trying to do it. People that want to exercise 7 days a week ultimately burn out because they forget that exercise leads to becoming a healthy person. So if your rule of life is just another list of things to do, it's important that you reframe it and think about the why you are doing it. Ultimately, I think it's all about becoming a person that Jesus made all of us to be. He desires that we live an unhurried, relaxed, comfortable, and joyful life in His presence and in relationship with the most important people in our life. If your rule of life is causing you to be more stressed, overworked, or irritable, then I think you should go back and rethink your rule of life. And so as you are living it out, check in with yourself on a regular basis. Though some of these things that you put on your rule of life are going to be work, no doubt. But after some time, are you enjoying the transformation that you're seeing in your life? Are you becoming more easygoing, restful, comfortable in your own skin, and joyful as a person? If so, then you are living out your best rule of life. But if you're not, again, I would strongly encourage you to consider that this is not just another list of things to do, but instead an intentional rhythm and a cadence for being the best and most God-honoring person that He has created you to be. So, one last check, as not to belabor this before you move on. Does your rule, the things that you're starting to sketch down and think about in your mind, does that lead you to a life of fulfillment of who you were made to be? Once you have a rule that you feel good about, something in all or most of the areas on the matrix, there are the 2 last filters that you should consider. Number 1, as we discussed last week, does your rule of life allow you to fulfill your part in the Great Commission of making disciples of all nations, as Jesus commanded us as believers, and also the greatest commandment, that is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself? If your rule of life is not helping you to do those things better, then I would consider prayerfully how you might steward your time to do the greatest commission and the great commandment better in your own life. And finally, how have you incorporated the most important relationships in your life into your rule? Consider allowing your spouse and your family, especially if you have older kids, to speak into your rule of life. Do they see that your rule of life is going to lead you into deeper relationship with them and with God? Also, your missional community. These are people that God, we believe, has placed in your life to be praying for you, your rule of life, and to hold you accountable to it. Consider that you, as we talked about in the Life Together series, don't live in a vacuum. You are part of a great community, a great cloud of witnesses, of people that are following after Jesus and wanting to be transformed by His teaching and in relationship with Him. And He has placed people in your life, people that love and care about you, that want the best for you. And so, does it honor God, the closest relationships that you have in your missional community? Consider that before you set out on living your rule of life. As we learned last week, according to Stephen Macchia, a personal rule of life is a holistic description of the Spirit-empowered rhythms and relationships that create, redeem, sustain, and transform the life God invites you to humbly fulfill for Christ's glory. Our goal in setting this one-year rhythm and cadence for your life is so that it remains aspirational, yet approachable enough that you don't feel as though you are committing to something that you are destined to fail at. So check back with your rule regularly. Is your rule of life helping you and leading you to fulfill your why? Are you growing closer to God? Are your spiritual disciplines getting better and increasing in frequency? And are your most loving relationships growing or getting worse? And ultimately, do you feel as though you're fulfilling your unique vocation and mission in this life? Now, this is a great deal of work that we've undertaken over the last 2 weeks. But we truly believe here at Orchard Church that this work is absolutely critical in living out a spiritually formative and healthy life with Jesus and in community. And so thank you so much for taking the time and the investment to consider the frame and mission of your life, all of which to craft a personal rule of life. We believe it's going to be transformative, and we are praying that God would meet you where you are and help you to grow into the person He has created you to be. This week, there will not be discussion questions appearing on your screen. Instead, print out or sketch out the personal rule of life matrix. Take the responses to your questions from last week and set out on crafting your personal rule of life. When it's completed, bring it next week to your missional community ready to share with others. We are so excited for you and praying for you as you set out to live a life of intentionality through your rule of life. Grace and peace be with you, friends. Thank you so much for being a part of community at Orchard Church.